Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. And please let me start out by extending thanks and gratitude for coming out and checking out the show, the Shout Out Show, the SOS with me, your host, Preacher Moss. This is a bit of a different show. I'm actually going to be speaking on some art. I'm going to be speaking on a peer, a comedic peer, if you will, on his episode. Now, before we get flowing into that, I'm going to open up the comments section because it's going to be really interesting for those of you who have seen Dave Chappelle's recent Netflix special. I don't know if it's Netflix or not. There's some confusion around that. It was free. He let it out on. It was on YouTube or Netflix. That's not the point. The point is the merits of the actual show. So I'm opening up the comment section early, and I would suggest that at this point in time, maybe for this show, we actually began to talk about what we saw. The name of the special was called um, 846, and it coincides with Dave Chappelle being off stage for some more than 80 days. So anybody that knows Chappelle knows that he's a prolific comedian, constantly touring, constantly working on material. Uh, a lot of comedians aspire to be like him in that epic, self included. Thus, I've found different ways to do it. And let me say before we get started that Dave Chappelle is a younger comedian than yours truly, Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum, Layla. How you doing, sister? Dave is a younger comedian, so it's interesting to have watched this special because there were certain nuances that I felt were missed during the special, certain things that maybe we should pay attention to. And I'll start out by saying I enjoyed what the effort was. I understood what the spirit was, only because I've tracked his stand up for a number of years and I've done some due diligence in terms of his research. And what I do like about Dave's Mr. Chappelle, I'll call him Mr. Chappelle, if you will. What I like about Mr. Chappelle's approach to comedy is that he is very important about nuancing ideas. What I thought was missed by a lot of people is the transition that he had to go through. He started out by talking about being called into action by someone else. That would be Don Lemon of CNN, who made a plea or call to action that celebrities need to come out and speak about this type of thing. Dave Chappelle is potentially one of the most celebrity people that you're watching in modern times. There are no phone booths he goes in to put on a cape. He doesn't take any special pills to give him strength. He takes perception. His number one talent is to take perception, bend it in a way whereby you can see something a little bit different from the white light when it's refracted. So you can see a different color, if you will, a different hue, if you will. When we look at certain things, if you really want to get a really good understanding what he's talking about, you have to do your homework. I'm gonna chalk this up to brother Ibrahim Moss, cousin. Sent me a clip of Dave Chappelle at the Mark Twain Awards that was released earlier this year, and he talked about the idea of where he came from. Where he came from is something that is needs to be thoroughly investigated. He comes from a background of his mother being one of the leading people to establish African American studies at Wilberforce. I think it's Wilberforce, right outside of Wright State University, something like that. But a leading advocate and provocateur of African American studies. Most comedians, though they're very funny, particularly African American comedians, though we're very funny, we're very witty, could be very creative, we're not historians. When I say we're not historians, means that we look to a book to give us a momentary understanding of what's going on, but we don't do the research. In educational terms, we'll do the term paper, but we don't want a thesis, and we don't have the leg strength to do the doctorate. What you saw with Dave Chappelle on stage, and it was a small stage, you saw him evolve into something that maybe he didn't want to be. Maybe it's not his style. Dave Chappelle is a master teacher, but he's a master teacher when he knows that he's informing, if you will, informing the audience of a particular type of thing that they've already been abreast about, but they lack nuance. They lack content. That's what makes this thing funny. When you watch the special, it was cathartic because what you said, I'm gonna give my little brother a shot here. I sound like him, AK. When I watch the special, you realize that there's a difference between being a master teacher and a student teacher. Let me say that again. Okay. Let me see that. Is my sound up, everybody? I hope my sound is up. Yeah, my sound is going. It's that aspect of being a master teacher and a student teacher. And when I say that, I say it with the utmost respect because Dave Chappelle, throughout the years, has been one of the master teachers. I'm happy to say that we share one of the greatest mentors in the world, Mr. Dick Gregory. And anybody who stood or kneeled at the feet of Dick Gregory, you learned the nuance and the ambiance of taking truth, breaking it, bending it, and making a situation, a scenario whereby the truth now has levels. The truth now has levels, and people can attach to those particular levels. Let me also say this about what you're seeing, because you may not ever see this again in terms of a comedian. Let me start by saying these type of comedians are dying out, yourself included. You're seeing the last of comedians who are essentially not historians, but Pan-Africanists. We attach the struggle of the African American all the way back to Africa. So when we talk about oppression, we know about colonialism. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I talked about Donald Trump, and the magic that he had was that he actually found a way to effectively colonize white people here in the United States. It's a deep statement. It has to have a lot of context, but this is out of that school of being whereby we are the last Pan-Africanists, meaning that we can, if you will, bridge the gap. Now, let me go a little bit further. There's some things that, in the special, there's always going to be about the treatment of women, ethical treatment of women. You have to keep that standard. Otherwise, you contaminate a lot of what you say, and you come across as patriarchal. So I understand the aspect. My brother is telling me, let me put this up. He could have been a lot more critical. I think the thing about being really critical, JT, of right-wing pundits is this fact: if they don't know what you're talking about, then you've just engaged them. You just gave them a bigger platform. They're not the smartest people in the world. When you talk about the right-wing conspiracy, the right-wing movement, if you will, it's built upon the scope that nothing can hurt us. And when they say nothing can hurt us, it really means that nothing can penetrate us. They're not a listening core. They're not an inviting group, not just to African American, but they're not an inviting group to anything that pulls them out of their core values, per se. They're very absolutist. So sometimes you'll waste time. Like the sister he talked about, Candace Owens, talking about body parts, stuff like that. The thing that I do believe that Dave could expand it on is talking about the surroundings, if you will, that produce a Candace Owens. When I say the surroundings and the circumstances that produce a person, a black woman in blackface, is something that can educate us all. Because that is Hollywood. That is where we come from. So wherever you're going to have a Dave Chappelle, freedom fighter, you're going to have a Candace Owens. Because the system delineates. It rewards both in their own way. However, the pathway to this one might be more difficult than the pathway to this one, and vice versa. And also being a female has a whole nother dilemma, a whole nother, I want to say, dimension to it. But when I was watching the special, these are some things I thought we overlooked. that he was very specific in not defending the content in his when he got his Mark Twain Award. He talked about defending the art form, and not the content, which means that you have to be accepting of everything, even right-wing pundits. He says that. He talks about listening to racist comedians and stuff like that, and he makes a joke about it. But he said you have to be open to the world, because in essence, if you look at him as a Pan-Africanist and a product of African-American studies, Dave Chappelle is your common everyday, well, you don't have him common every day, but let's say a nuanced present-day griot. I can say I'm the same, because when we take news, we don't react to news right away. We look at news and try to find out or back up or deconstruct where the news comes from. So if I was talking about, per se, COVID, I have to go all the way back to the beginnings of not COVID, but the idea of what was China trying to do in terms of stemming any kind of infectious disease. And I found some very interesting things about that. It wasn't supposed to happen. What happened, and I won't go into it too long, but what happened was China had developed a very sophisticated system to detect infectious disease. They invested in it. The system didn't work. And instead of the people who had built the system saying it didn't work, they were afraid to tell the Chinese government because it had been a massive failure. Thus, then you got a Wuhan. When you look at Dave Chappelle talk about 846, 846 is actually in the Quran. It's the spoils of war, ironically. Now, I know he didn't think, I don't know if he thought this up or he references, but I was talking to Dr. Bilal Ware about this exact subject matter, if you will. Let me read to you what 846 says in the Quran, and then I'll move forward. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Spoils of war, Surah 8, Ayat 46 says, obey God and his messenger and do not dispute with one another, or you will be discouraged and weakened. Persevere. Surely God is with those who persevere. One of the things that might have been missed in this piece of stand-up, and keep in mind that this is a very raw piece of stand-up. This is not refined Dave Chappelle, where you got 50 shows to get it right. This is not a refined Dave Chappelle. He's been pushed into a space where he believes he has to what he has to say is, I don't have to say anything. So his words or his comments to us is, I now have to come out here and tell you that the streets don't need me, but I have to come out and tell you that the streets don't need me, because that's the way culture is right now. He never came out on stage to tell you he was right. He never came out on stage to tell you he was wrong. He came on stage to tell you he had an opinion. And even in giving that opinion, it was, I want to say, it was didactic, meaning he didn't want to be there to teach you. And the laughter was not there, but he wasn't there to make you laugh. I think that's one thing. I mean, people go, oh, it's a great special, but it's not a great special unless you understand what the message is moving forward. The message is moving forward is that, A, Dave Chappelle has found himself in a space where people look at him as a leader, because we are in a space that we have leaderless organizations. Even the president of the United States, on a good day, you'll never hear from me that say, that's my leader. Obama had said it. Even George Bush, both Bushes had said, that's my leader. That's my president. But I've yet, if you will, to build up the intestinal fortitude to literally look at you with a straight face and say, that's my guy. That's the leader of my country. We may not disagree, or we may not agree, may not disagree, whatever it is, but that's my leader. We don't have that nuance right now. And what he said was interesting about the children, the youth, because Dave Chappelle, while funny and insightful, dynamic, he's getting older. He's getting older. And when you get older, or when you get around my age, at some point in time, we look to see if the lessons have been learned. We look to see if people are properly interpreting the breadcrumbs that have been left, and some folks are not. You know, if you watch his special, and he's talked about griots, he talked about the death of the griot was like the death of a library, and I do agree with that. The idea of communication at this point in time here in the United States is so fragmented. We don't talk to one another. I thought he was going to go into the aspect of how we don't talk to one another, how we're not in a space where we're not given to communicate with people because we're afraid of other folks' ideas. The interesting part when you start watching 846, he's giving you a soliloquy of, I've been invested for years, but you haven't been listening. I've been invested for years, but you haven't been listening. When I say been invested, it means like if you were to talk to me about civil rights, I can tell you what my mother did for 20 years of her life, my aunt 20 years of her life. I can give you the scope of being a child and doing the second march on Washington, holding hands as a young marshal. My mother, Dick Gregory, and on my right side, Bill Cosby, who was my hero. I mean, he was an icon. This is at the age of, I don't know, 13. I'm marching with Bill Cosby and Belafonte and all of these guys who at some point in time took this celebrity, if you will, and built a consensus about what America was supposed to be. Amazing. If we were to have a march on Washington right now, if you were to take people, maybe this is a Chappelle joke, if you were to take our leaders, our bona fide leaders under the age of 50, who would lead the march? Who would lead the march? Who would you show up to see as a speaker, as an activist? Like, really? Now, I want to turn this around and keep it in a comedy conversation. But I also want to remind everybody of what you're seeing. Because what you saw in Dave Chappelle's 846 is a reflection, real time, of what you're seeing. It wasn't an opportunity to get everything processed. It wasn't an opportunity to lead into, introspection, if you will. It wasn't an introspective special. It was an emotional special. We found ourselves moved, if you will. What's up, B? Bartica Blue, good to see you, baby. I think we found ourselves moved to anti-emotion. Because right now, everybody's angry, da-da-da. But part of the anger in some regards is we just don't have a solution. You know, like the old, what's that play when color girls consider suicide, something like that. The line was, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's what America is right now. You watch comedy on this special of a man who is sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, because you can beat that drum, but for so long. You can beat it for so long. And after a while, it's just noise. It's not meant to keep pace. It's not meant to inspire you. It's not meant to hype you up. It's just noise now. And everybody knows with noise, you just want noise to stop. 846 spoke about several things. One is ineffective leadership. We are a celebrity leadership culture. We tune in now to the case of George Floyd, but we want to see who the celebrities are. I've never been to a funeral where they shout out the celebrities. Normally, the people sit in the back. It's the family that you shout out. It's the family that you make your prayers for. We don't bring people on stage to say, hey, listen, you're doing good things. I'm supporting us. That's an understanding, a given. If that's the case, then you might as well bring the pallbearers on stage and the people that take care of the repast and the people who drive the limousines, because that's what you're leading to. Let me say this again, I like what Mr. Chappelle did with 846. However, there are some points that are missed, and one of them is you cannot, at your choosing, in people's mind, disconnect from being a part of pop culture. And in the absence of leadership, people are going to call on you. And I'm not asking Mr. Chappelle to be right or wrong. I'm just saying be realistic. I remember asking, I won't even go to that, but it was funny, there's some people, if you will, there are layers of people in the comedy game. There are layers of people who they're going to be able to get on stage and speak to 15,000 people at one click of an eye, one microphone check, and say a lot of things. And then there are going to be people who will say the same things just as effective, if not more effective, but they're going to have to go to 15,000 individual people. The work, both sides, is important. However, it's just different pathways of getting there. And I would encourage everybody to please watch 846 again. Understanding that this scope that he's talking about, most people are missing. He can't tell you or spend time on stage to say that I'm a Pan-Africanist. I understand so much more than what I'm talking to you about. However, if I gave it to you right now, you gag on it, you choke on it. And that's the choices that you have to make as a comedian. Because I saw him in his face go through that. And I've spoken to him at times about these things because you have so much to give because you're seeing the much bigger picture. But America in life at times just give you one frame at a time. You don't see the whole movie. Sometimes you guys hear me on this show make predictions. Like I literally said, I thought that the aspect of how the protesters were treated in Washington D.C. at Lafayette Park, particularly not how they were gassed, which is one thing, and run out of the park, which is one thing. But I thought the thing that was overlooked was the use of a helicopter to disperse a peaceful demonstration. And I brought that up. Why? I said because to do that, you have to be actively engaged in the military. There's certain liabilities. National Guard does just not fly helicopters. Is that funny? No, it's peculiar, but it fits into a nice mosaic or puzzle that we have to put together for ourselves. So Dave Chappelle, in many regards, is the puzzle man. He is a puzzle guy. Unfortunately, with 846, parts of the puzzle are missing because we don't know exactly what it is. It's sort of like being a teacher, doing a problem, but you don't know how it's going to turn out. And all your students are watching. And you can tell your students, I don't know how it's going to turn out. But in the student mind, the teacher has to know. The teacher can't be infallible. Or fallible, if you will. I'm sorry. So I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to say a few things before I go. Because this will be a part of art critique. You'll come back eventually to 846, but I'm going to say come back to 846, Dave Chappelle special, in 6 months. And I want you to enjoy great comedy in 6 months. Because in 6 months, you'll enjoy and you'll understand that Dave Chappelle is a student teacher, but in 6 months, he may be a master teacher about what he's talking about. One of the great aspects of good comedy or exceptional comedy, and I talk about this in my course, is the fact if you're a good comedian, you will make people guess incorrectly about your choices on stage. If you're a great comedian, you will make the audience feel exceptionally happy that they made a wrong decision about where they thought you were going with your choices because they're with you that much. And more importantly, as he said, they trust you. As you go away, remember one of the things that he said that was really, really important as that griot, as that person that writes down history, if you will. And I say write down history. You don't necessarily want to be a part of it. You want to write it down. He said something about who he is in his Mark Twain special when he got his award, but also in his special at 846. What he said was, in a roundabout way, but not so roundabout, was that he was a product of history. He's a historian. So he pulls things out and he has said, you remember? That's because he remembers. And he needs to remind you constantly about where this comedy is coming from, which is his reality, but it's a reality that's recorded and he's sharing it with you. He's a Pan-Africanist. He is the W.E.B. Du Bois type of element. He is like Malcolm who comes back from Hodge. He's these things. And I'm not saying he's special. There are a lot of us walking around like that. There are a lot of brothers walking around like that. But they're not valued. And the way current society is, we have to hide. We have to bury it deep within just to protect it. We're not afraid to give it out, but we have to protect it because we have to be so careful about who we give it to, who you give that information to. You know, he talked about Candace Owens. It's interesting because at some point in time, someone gave Candace Owens some information and they said, do the right thing with it. Now, you could judge whether she does the right thing with it or not. Sound like Sister Ika? You be that choice. You'll make that choice. That's not for me. That's your own independent thing. But he talked about the institutions. And he said comedy is one of the institutions that he realizes is that comedy is the one thing where we have an opportunity to give you the truth. He said all the other institutions have lied to you. It could be anywhere from education, which is lied to you, aspects of organized religions, lied to you, finance, lied to you, politics, lied to you. But this is the one case, and I hope you appreciate it because you watched a man who was humble enough to go from being seen as a teacher to a student teacher. Student teacher. Our great teachers in comedy are gone. Dick Gregory, Richard Pryor, Carlin, Cosby. You can say whatever you want to, but Cosby's level of activism back in the day is excellent, if you will. Lenny Bruce, gone. All these people have left. And so we have a space now where sadly, not only have they left, but our generations right now don't know about them. And so as you watch Dave Chappelle, and I'll wrap up here, appreciate the history, appreciate the nuance, appreciate that there's somebody out there who records history and he gives it to you on stage. Whether it's laughter, whether it's anger, whether it's profanity, whether it's insight, whatever, the willingness to give it to you on stage, even when it's not refined, even when it's raw, is a very, 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 very American, African American tradition. Dave Chappelle, the griot, Dave Chappelle, the historian, is what you might have missed. Move away all the celebrity, and what you have is somebody who's tied to a commitment. And whatever the situation is, he's going to give you the commitment, even when he doesn't want to. Brothers and sisters, that's it. I'm going to shout out my last brother right here, Brother Muhammad. Thank you so much, man. Everybody coming out to the show, I appreciate it. I would say if you just got here, I want you to watch Dave Chappelle's 846 and then watch this telecast, if you will, and get a little bit of nuance. It's a deep, it's a really deep, profound understanding of comedy as truth and comedy as history. All right. I mean, so listen, I gotta go. You guys have been excellent. I hope to see you soon, and we'll actually break down some other things, a little bit more fun than 846, inshallah, which I did enjoy. Just so you know, I did like it, and I did reach out to Mr. Chappelle, let him know that I appreciate it, and here are my notes. So listen, you guys have been great. Oh, I got to shout out my boy right here, all the way from Baytown, all the way from the Bay, David, brother Dawood Hawk. You got David up there. I remember, he's messing me up. I got to give him his Muslim name, brother David Hawk. No, Dawood Hawk, man. Thank you, everybody, and we'll be on the show tomorrow. Appreciate you. Thank you for the support. It seems like people are tuning in. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, and inshallah, man, we'll get it. Oh man, this is my man right here, all the way from Canada, Toronto, man. I hope everything's going well with your business, brother. We haven't talked in a minute. In any event, folks, I gotta go, but you guys have been amazing, and you know what? On behalf of myself, Mr. Chappelle, who's not here, you know what? Talk about that history. Look up the word Pan-Africanism, and you will be amazed exactly the type of work that's going on. That's right. David Hot Pauline's boy. All right, now, everybody, take care of yourself. I'm going to shout out my brother right here. Brother Mikhail, thank you for coming on. Appreciate you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the Quran, again, that was the spoils of war, Surah 8, ayat 46. Check it out.